What's up, Rockstars? Today I'm going to be talking about Primal, the Awakening, and all of the combat details that we know so far. Now this is going to be pretty comprehensive. It's not going to answer everything, of course, but it gives you quite a bit of information on how this game plays. Both game flow, equipment sets, card actions and combos and deck building. All of that kind of stuff is going to be in here. Elemental weaknesses and boss mechanics and movements and the game board and all that. So you're going to see a lot here. So let's go ahead and get started right now. All right, let's go ahead and get into the the tease here. So the tease, really, the big point here is the game board. Now, this is not the actual game board. What this is a mock-up. It's a kind of a quick wireframe of the game board. I'm going to be talking about this more often towards the end. So we're going to tie this together, but just keep this in mind. Essentially, it looks like you have about a boss in the middle and maybe some segments. So let's try and figure that out. But first, let's discuss all the kind of intricacies around that, and then we'll encapsulate it into this game board and how you'll be interacting with the game board while doing these things. So to start out, we have 4 different kinds of cards. We have the red action cards, we have the green dodge cards, the yellow Parry cards, and the blue maneuver cards. Now, each of these cards is set up fairly similar. So essentially, you have in the upper right-hand corner whether or not you get aggro or not. So if it's red, you get aggro. If it's not red, you don't get aggro. On the left, you get a kind of a cost, essentially a stamina cost to do that. Now, how would you pay that cost? Well, that's in the lower left. The lower left is how much stamina you gain by discarding the card. So if you wanted to pay Jumping Slash, and you had Sidestep, you could discard Sidestep, get those 2, and then suddenly you would have the 2 that you needed to play Jumping Slash. Or maybe you did a counter move and got rid of that. Or maybe you got rid of Jumping Slash and Wide Open Flank to pay for Sidestep. There's all sorts of different options there. And then in the lower right is just kind of the XP you need. Now, the only other thing to note is, of course, that symbol. That symbol's also color-coded. It's just kind of a symbol you can use. So notice like the red and the blue have a certain symbol, and the yellow and the green have this different symbol. You'll see that symbol a lot of times because, for instance, in the Jumping Slash, you'll see that it is type slash, and you'll deal additional damage equal to the number of blue in the discard pile. And that blue or that maneuver is that same symbol you see up there. Additionally, if you see the blue, it actually it interacts with the red. If you are in a flank position, you may immediately play a red card with a slash trait for free. We'll be talking about that in more detail, but for now, let's go ahead and look at just the action card here. So, the action card is how you'll be doing a lot of damage. You'll be doing the damage based off of your weapon, of course, and some other stats. And of course your position on the board and whatnot. So you'll see it kind of has a little type, and it'll give you aggro, and it says a deal additional damage equal to the number of blue in your discard pile. So you'll see some interaction between the discard pile and your hand as well, and that'll be changing constantly. We'll get more into that when we talk about decks. Then you have your parry. The parry halves the damage that you're going to get, so if you're going to be attacked, you can parry and get the half damage. Additionally, sometimes you'll get bonuses, like the counter move, so you can search your deck for a card with a slash trait and add it to your hand. Well, that'd be awful useful for that red Jumping Slash card, right? So if we are wanting to attack and we don't have the red card we want, maybe we want to play Jumping Slash, well, we can play counter move, half the damage, and it only costs 1, and then we can search our deck for a slash trait card, and then we can go ahead and get that Jumping Slash card into our hand, which is great. Additionally, perhaps you want to Sidestep. Now, the green card is a dodge, and it fully negates damage, so you will not get damage. And of course, again, you can get some bonuses. So this is a 2 cost, so it costs a bit more, but you get to draw 2 as well. So you get to avoid damage and draw 2 as long as you can pay the cost of this, which is 2. So notice this you would play when it's not on your turn. Next, we have the maneuver card. This is a wide open flank. If you're in a flank position, you may immediately play a red card with a slash trait for free. Now, again, that costs 2 as well. So here you can see kind of some more different ones. We have Deflect, where you can choose an ally to draw 1 card for each aggro card you have in your hand. You have the Tactical Evade, where if you paid with a blue card for it, you get to draw 1. It only costs 1, so you could, discard pretty much any blue card and be able to do that and then draw 2 as well as evade. Again, that's useful. So not only did you evade, but you drew as well. It's a very tactical evade. Or perhaps you have a very expensive 3-cost concussion, but it stuns where you blank the active stance ability card. So that's huge. Okay, so let's go ahead and go through a flow here. So perhaps first we counter move, or we search your deck for the slash trait and add it to our hand. So now we have jumping slash, but we're not going to play it yet, though it says deal additional damage equal to the number of blue in your discard pile. So what we want to do is have wide open flank. So if we use wide open flank, we discard it into the discard pile as long as we're in a flank position. We may then immediately play that red jumping slash and get bonus damage because now that's in our discard pile. So you can see just with these 3 cards, the kind of combos you can build, the turn orders you can do, and this is called a sequence. And you'll be wanting to do these sequences or these kind of attack flows for various different reasons, which we'll get into when we talk about the equipment. But essentially, we just want to be mindful of not only the card interactions themselves, but how those interact with the gear that we have. Okay, speaking of gear, let's go ahead and get started on that. Here's a Flametongue level 3 sword, or a great sword. So you'll notice in the upper left-hand corner, it has an element, and then it has kind of a class type. So this is a great sword, and it has a fire element. You'll notice on the left, it has those same colors, the red, blue, yellow, and green, or the action, maneuver, parry, and dodge. And then the number in there tells you how you build your deck. So you'll have 6 action cards, you'll have 5 maneuver cards, you'll have another 6 parry cards, and 5 dodge cards. So that will be your deck. That's kind of what you'll be dealing with. Now, obviously, you can, buy and kind of work and what cards you have in there, but they have to follow that flow. So depending on your gear will also depend on if you move around more often or if you maneuver around the enemy more, or perhaps you're just a big, dodger and you're just dodging stuff and buffing other people, or perhaps you're just dealing damage. Now, notice down here at the very bottom, there's a 9. That 9 is the amount of damage you're dealing. So when it says that you deal damage, you're going to deal 9 damage. So it could be 9 plus some if you add some. So for instance, you see 2 red symbols here, or 2 action symbols. It says deal additional damage equal to the printed stamina cost of the topmost card in your discard pile. Well, that 2 red is from your sequence. So as you're playing these cards, if you make the sequence that has 2 red in it, well, then you're actually going to be doing plus damage based off the cost of the discard. So if you discarded that wide open flank to pay for something, that would do 2 damage, or 2 additional damage. Total of 11 damage. So that's just based off of what you have there. Now, one thing to note here is that there are different types. So you see here's fire, here's a bone type, and then here's like a gem type of some kind. And so you have the shimmering gem or the dragon claw or the Flametongue. Now they're all great swords, but you'll notice the deck changes between them. So for instance, this shimmering gem has less dodge, but more attack. So it's maybe a little bit more of a glass cannon build perhaps. Or you have the Dragon Claw, which is a little bit slower, so you're not going to have as many maneuver cards in there. But otherwise, it's kind of even around everything. You'll notice that the base damage changes as well below, and that each of the special cases do too. So the Dragon Claw says when playing a red card, you may pay 1 extra stamina, and if you do, then that card deals 3 additional damage. That's just 3 straight damage just for discarding 1 extra stamina. Now, that extra stamina can, obviously come from a card, but it can be used perhaps partially, or you're still paying for another card. Or you have the Shimmering Gem. It says at the start of your turn, if you have 3 plus red in your hand, reduce the cost of those cards by 1 until the end of turn. Now with 6 of them, they're going to have quite a few in their hand. It's kind of lopsided towards there, at least a little bit. And so as long as you're holding in there, essentially you have these big turns. So the Shimmering Gem is kind of a glass cannon. It's a burst damage. So you're going to want to gain a hand with at least 3, and then probably play them all because they cost less and do a whole bunch of damage very quickly. Alright, let's talk about more sets. So the helm and the chest, both of those combined, you'll see a little heart in the lower right-hand corner. That's how much health you have. So if you have this set, this fire set, with the helm and the chest plate and the weapon, then you are dealing 9 base damage, and you have 18 health, the 8 plus the 10. Now you'll notice here that, again, it has a little kind of blurb. Each one kind of does something unique. The Dragon Scale Helm here has at the start of your turn, you may look at the topmost card in your deck. If that card is a red card, you can add it to your hand. Super useful. But perhaps you could combine that with something else as well. Here in the Dragon Plate, you have when you take damage, you may search your discard pile for a card of your choice and put it at the top of your deck. So these kind of almost interact with each other. You can essentially move a red card up to your hand, so you can be a little bit more aggressive here. Now you'll also see this strong and weak, and then these symbols here. So these are the elements, and essentially, no matter what, Whether it's the monster you're fighting or yourself in your armor, you are strong against some things and weak against some things. So you might have this Flametongue, this fire element, but you might be going against some fire lizard that is actually strong against fire, so you would not want to use that. The 3 here says the difference. So if you're doing 9 damage and the monster is strong 3 against fire, you'll be doing 9 minus 3 damage all the time. Additionally, if it's weak against fire, you'll be doing an additional 3 damage. And the same goes for you. So you can see here that the dragon scale armor is weak against bone, for instance, but good against, frost or ice or whatever that is. Same with the dragon plate here. You're going to have a strong and a weak. So that kind of determines your both your alignment in the elements and what you're strong and weak against, and the enemies have something very similar. Let's talk about items real quick. So you can bring a set amount of items. You can't bring a whole bunch, but you can bring some. And again, they act quite differently. They all have an element, and they range a lot. So these are just level 1 items, so obviously there's going to be a lot more. The diamond spear here, you can place 1 counter on this card. Most of them work with counters. And then at the end of the turn, if you do not have the aggro, in other words, if you're not going to get hit, you may remove 1 counter from this card and deal the damage to the monster equal to the struggle value of the topmost card of the behavior discard pile. So I'm not going to get into the enemy AI so much right now, just because I think it would be divergent from gear and like the player play style. So this is focused on us as players, and then I'll focus on kind of the AI and elsewhere in a future video perhaps. But essentially, you get to deal damage if you're not doing aggro, so you can kind of get a cheap shot in. Or you can bring a Big Jaws Trap, perhaps. It's a bone type. And you get to reshuffle X cards from your hand into your deck and place X counters on this card. When the monster reveals a peril card, you may spend 1 counter from this card to deal 3 damage to that monster. So every time a peril card is moved through and you reveal another one, bam, that's another 3 damage. They kind of walked into that trap. Or you can do a gauntlet, which can enhance something. So when you pay 2+ stamina to play either a red or a blue card, you can deal 2 additional damage to that monster. So in other words, when you're doing some kind of movement towards the monster, you get to actually do a little bit extra damage. Now there's also potions, and potions again work mostly with counters. So here it says that the Elamore here at level 1, you get to place 2 counters on this card and remove 1 counter from this card and choose a player in your area to heal 2 health points. We'll describe areas here soon. Or you can do an evoke where you can place 2 counters on the card and remove 1 from this card to draw 1. So you can just kind of draw cards, and you could do that, it sounds like, pretty quickly. Or in Petum, where you take 1 strain token and reduce the stamina cost of the first card you play this turn by 1. Lastly, you have a master. You have a back and a front. You start on the back, which is this black here, and it shows here on the top this number 3, and that's how many times you have to do this. Here's this heavy strike. If you have 2 red in your sequence, red in a row, you can place a counter on this card. You get 3 counters, you get to flip it over, and you can get this mastery at level 1. Well, when you flip it over, suddenly you have the heavy strike. Now, while you're in the flank position, attack cards you play deal 3 times the damage, or 3 times additional damage. So that's huge. You're doing these heavy strikes, and you're kind of building up to that. So you definitely want to kind of keep your mastery in mind. You want to keep your armor in mind. You want to keep your equipment in mind, your items, and of course your position. Okay, let's go back to this board. So let's talk about how this basically works, how flanking works, terrain, stuff like that. Again, this is not the actual game board. It'll look a lot prettier than this. This is just a mock-up just to kind of get an idea of what it looks like, and it's all pretty. I was going to do some clip art, but Primal was nice enough to send me some stuff. So at the center is the boss miniature, and he will turn, or it will turn, to attack whoever has aggro. There are 4 sectors here, and multiple people can be in a sector. And additionally, there could be terrain, there could be rocks, there could be all sorts of different stuff. This kind of makes up the kind of battle around the monster. And you can kind of think of this as like you're surrounding a monster and you're kind of going and then doing a jab and then coming over here and then dodging and then rolling behind some rocks and then leaping over to the other side and doing something else. It's very much like that. So when you're moving around sectors, and to move you have to use stamina. So all this time you're having to discard these cards to do stamina. And that's kind of the difficulty there. Now you'll draw up to your hand size each time. So you'll always have that hand, but what you draw and how you use that stamina, what you're paying for, definitely matters. Additionally, it can matter on where you're at. So for instance, if there are rocks in your sector, well, you can actually hide behind the rocks and take avoid some damage. But of course, those rocks will then be destroyed. And so the map will kind of change based off that. Additionally, if there's people in your zone, you can get a combat buff. You can heal people. You kind of saw that with that. You can also flank. The flanking is the enemy's weak spot, and that can change over the course of the battle, depending on how that's going. And of course, just as it's moving around and stuff like that. So if it's weak on its right side, you're going to have to move around as it moves around, or try and talk to your teammates and have them draw aggro, so you have to stay there because you don't want to waste movement points to try and follow it. So ideally, somebody can just kind of tank it for a little bit. Maybe they got some rocks there or some good armor or something like that, that they're strong against their type. So that they take less damage. Regardless, and maybe somebody else is healing it and you're just heavy striking in the flank. And it's actually kind of different when it comes to being a boss battle genre board game. So you have the aggro where the monster turns to attack you and it'll target the whole sector. So if somebody else is in there, they're getting hit too. So ideally, if you're tanking it, maybe you want to be alone, maybe you don't, just depends. Flanking is on the monster's weak side. You change during the game, and you move via also playing stamina. There's some team play where you can see protection, attack bonuses, card advantages, heals, all that kind of stuff. And then the terrains like the rocks that can block attacks, but they're then destroyed. And of course, more. There might be some objectives based on position and what you're doing, and if you have to hit him with a flank shot and stuff like that, all that can kind of change as well. But that's kind of the basic synopsis of what we've kind of gone over when it comes to this combat. And I wanted to go over it because it's just so different. It's definitely unique. It's not like Kingdom Death Monster or Oathsworn or Antitrust Odyssey or any of these other boss battle type games, even stuff like Wild Ascent. This is very, very different. It's card based, there are no dice, and you're kind of surrounding this monster and kind of shifting and moving as it's shifting and moving. And of course, then the boss is doing a whole bunch of stuff. So the monster is doing, these peril things where you're trying to prevent it from gaining those, because then it'll spin those to do special moves against you. And so there's a lot of juggling between movement, between aggro, between your equipment, your sequence, other people's locations, the monster and what it's doing. There's a lot at play here, and I suspect it'll be fairly nuanced. We'll have to keep an eye on it, of course, but I just kind of wanted to get this out here because I know a lot of you probably didn't know about this. It's kind of new information that I just got from them, and I was excited to share it with you. Additionally, one of my other reasons for covering this is because I'm going to be covering Senkokushin here soon, and then afterwards I'm going to be doing a versus video where I'll be comparing Primal, The Awakening, and Senkokushin 5 Sacrifices, and kind of pitting them neck to neck and just kind of comparing and contrasting the two. I think they're kind of the two big boss battle games on the horizon, so we're going to kind of hash it out and see what's what and who's standing and who's not as good as another or something like that. Now, obviously, I haven't played these yet, but we can still base it off of a lot of information. So hopefully that video will be helpful. If it will, if that sounds good to you, that you want to see kind of these compared and contrast, be sure to subscribe with the notification bell, because YouTube doesn't care about your subscription. If you're not hitting that notification bell, it may or may not. It's a toss-up if it'll even show it to you. So hopefully that'll help you kind of see that in the future. If not, don't worry about it. That's fine too. I'll be doing it either way. So I hope you guys look forward to that. Thank you so much for watching, and I will talk to you guys again very, very soon.